Okay, so we're continuing now with the examination of the mixed groups. Okay, so now in the mixed groups, now we've done the faculties, now we come to a group which are called the bala, the powers. So often in the suttas, the Buddha mentions five, we call these five spiritual powers, and then sometimes he mentions other groups of powers. And so these are all grouped here just under the heading of the powers. So first we have the five spiritual powers. These are the powers of faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And these come again, they'll come under the aids to enlightenment. So I will discuss them there. Then there's another group of powers. I think it's the power of faith, energy, mindfulness, the sense of shame and the fear of wrongdoing that are mentioned in the suttas. And so these powers are added to the list of powers. So I've already explained the sense of, here it's translated shame, what I call the sense of self-respect or inner dignity, as a power in that it's able to motivate one to avoid, it has the power to prevent one from doing unwholesome actions, thinking unwholesome thoughts, out of one's sense of preserving, say, the nobility or dignity of one's character. And then the other is the power of the fear of wrongdoing, the power of moral dread. So one's fear of being criticized by others, fear of being punished by the state, fear of creating unwholesome karma and undergoing suffering in the future through that karma, that becomes a power that restrains the unwholesome tendencies. And then their opposites are also considered powers. It seems a little strange, but the power of shamelessness, so somebody who without a sense of shame, that lack of shame maybe is understood to be a power that will drive them to engage in unwholesome actions. And similarly, the power of the lack of moral dread. We call this moral audacity. Okay, so these are the powers. Altogether we get 9 powers. Now I want to move on to the next group, which is called the 4 predominants. Okay, the word that's translated predominant here is, in Pali, it's adipati. The word adipati the word pati means a lord or a master. Also it means a husband. But adi is the sense of over, an overlord, or here we render predominant. And these are said to be mental factors that dominate their associated mental states in performing a task and in accomplishing a goal. And there seems to be, superficially, a resemblance between the indriyas, the indriya are controlling faculties, and the adipati, which are predominance. But there's a difference between them that is explained in the guide to number 20. So it's said that the predominance of factors which dominate their associated mental states in undertaking and accomplishing difficult or important tasks. The difference between the predominance and the faculties lies in the degree and range of their control. A predominant exercises supreme control over the entire citta, the whole state of consciousness, whereas a faculty exercises control only in its own respective sphere. And so several faculties can be present in a single state of consciousness. For example, we can have somebody who has faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom all together in one powerful, wholesome state of consciousness. But only one predominant can be present at any given time. Then the commentaries compare this to, well, they use the example of a king who is the head of state, who is the lord over his ministers, while the faculties are compared to the ministers, which can govern their own departments, but cannot interfere with the others. So this simile, of course, it comes from, the medieval authors of the commentaries. Maybe today I would use like the example in the United States. Maybe we could say that the adipati is like the president of the country, and the faculties will be like the governors of the states. So the president, at least through the federal government, can determine policies that are binding on the whole country, and there's only one president at a time. But the governors, they have control over the administrative functions in their own states. And in the country like the United States or other countries with multiple regions or states, there can be many governors. Okay, we have 4 adipatis. So we could read this in the text. We have the chandadipati, which is desire as a predominant. And what's meant by desire here is not necessarily the same as craving, but this is remember, this is the desire in undertaking and accomplishing a difficult or important task. The second is energy or vigor. The third is the citta itself, consciousness itself is a predominant. And the fourth is investigation. An investigation is taken to be, the word vimangsa, translated investigation, is taken to be a simile, a synonym for wisdom. And what's important about the Adipatis is that only one can be a dominant or predominant in any particular citta at any particular time. Like there can be many faculties, but only one of these predominants will exercise the function of a predominant. So if the predominant factor is desire, only that is the predominant. You can't have energy, citta, and wisdom as predominance in that same state of consciousness. And so we could see the difference in the way people go about tasks. You know, when some people have a challenge, some people are driven by a strong desire to succeed in that task, to meet challenges, to overcome difficulties. In that case, we could say that desire is the means for their success, the predominant in all of their activities, which will result in their success. So you can see, now that the presidential campaign, at least for the primaries, is starting to gain momentum. So why are these candidates traveling all over the country? They have like 26 hours a day schedules, giving a talk one day maybe in New York, the next day they're in Chicago, 2 days later they might be in someplace in Texas, another day in California, next day in California. Desire is, we could say, the predominant in their cittas. It's desire to become the president. So that is the driving force. It's not necessarily greedy desire, but it's this desire to succeed in that campaign. Okay, for other people, their sort of means of accomplishment is energy. Desire and energy usually work very closely together, but for these people it will be sort of this boundless energy, which is their means of meeting obstacles, achieving their goals, dealing with challenges. And how citta functions as a predominant, I have to say that this is a bit of a puzzle for me. And I haven't seen it explained. I look for explanations in the texts, but I don't find them. So the only way I could understand this is in some way, I find two ways to understand this. One is to take citta and in the sense of the whole consciousness being involved in dealing with the obstacles or pursuing the goal. Another, perhaps, is to see citta here as representing not the whole consciousness, but maybe the factor of intention or sense of purpose. So these are just different ways to understand that. Maybe in the discussion, maybe somebody else has some idea. Okay, then the fourth predominant is investigation. So this is when trying to resolve a problem, rather than just depending upon the strength of desire, the force of energy, one uses one's thinking power to investigate what are these obstacles, what is the best approach, what is the way to resolve the problem. What is the way to find the kind of pathway to success? And so in the same person, different predominants can be functioning or can take on that role of domination at different times, but we also see different people in accordance with their character will have a tendency towards one predominant or another. Okay, so those are the predominants. Now we come to the next group of mixed factors, and these are called the nutriments, the four nutriments. Normally, the word nutriment, the way we use it in everyday language, is understood to be identical with food, nutrition. Are you getting enough to eat? Is your food sufficiently nutritious? But according to the Buddha's exposition, there are four nutriments. And here the word nutriment has the special meaning of, it's given in the guide, that which sustains by acting as a strong supporting condition. And so there are four nutriments enumerated even in the suttas. That is, the first is edible food, the second is contact, the third is volition, mental volition, and the fourth is consciousness. Then there are slight differences between the sutta method of explaining the four nutriments and the Abhidhamma method. According to the sutta method, the first, edible food, is a nutriment because it sustains the physical body. Of course, this is obvious. Then contact is the nutriment, the special nutriment for Vedana, for feeling, because it's through contact, the coming together of the sense faculty, the mind, and the object, that feeling arises. Then mental volition is what creates karma. And so it's said that mental volition, by creating karma, sustains rebirth in the three realms of existence. And then consciousness sustains the whole complex of mind and body, nama rupa, because it's when consciousness arises that the body and the other mental factors arise. And through the whole lifespan, consciousness is always, we could say, nourishing the body and the other mental functions. Okay, the Abhidhamma system gives a more technical explanation. So it says that edible food sustains the material phenomena of fourfold origination in the body. So all of the material phenomena of the body are sustained by edible nutriment. And then the other three nutriments sustain all of their associated mental phenomena as well as the material phenomena that are produced by them, produced by the mind. And so from this angle, contact is the nutriment not only for feeling, but for all the other mental factors existing, and for the citta itself. And also contact is the nutriment for all of the bodily or material phenomena that are produced by consciousness, by mind. And similarly, mental volition will be the nutriment for all of the associated mental phenomena, as well as for material phenomena produced by mind. And consciousness will be a nutriment for all of the associated mental phenomena and for bodily phenomena originating from mind. Okay, there are some technical distinctions and discussion in some of the other sections of the manual, but I'm not going to go into those. I want to cover the basic points. And also, unless one has really studied the first six chapters, it's rather difficult to understand that discussion. So now we move into the next group in the compendium of categories, and these are called the Bodhipakkhya Dhammas. I translate these as the aids to enlightenment. There's a popular translation of Bodhipakkhya Dhammas as wings to awakening, wings to enlightenment. It sounds very nice, but strictly it's not accurate. The word pakha actually means a wing, but pakkhya is an adjective derived from that, which means pertaining to a wing, pertaining to a particular side. So the Bodhipakkhiyas are things that are on the side of enlightenment or on the wing of enlightenment. Here, wing somewhat has the sense of like in left-winger, right-winger, right-winger, because the Bodhipakkhya Dhammas are contrasted with, I think the expression is the akusala pakkhya, and you don't want to say the wings to the unwholesome. So the contrast is between those things which are on the side of enlightenment and those things that are on the unwholesome side. And so the things that are on the side of enlightenment are the things that assist, that help in the process of enlightenment. And we have 37 Bodhipakkhya qualities, 37 aids to enlightenment. But these 37, you'll see, are arranged in 7 groups. This is the way the Buddha expounds them in the suttas, often just expounding one group or another on different occasions. But sometimes he speaks about all of them together and says that these are the things that you should constantly bear in mind and practice and teach in order that the Dhamma can last long in the world. And as we'll see as we go through these 7 groups, that they're not mutually exclusive, but rather they are very closely interrelated, so that sometimes one group is an elaboration of a factor mentioned in another group. And sometimes one set will compress a number of factors that have been expanded in other groups. And we have this arrangement, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases for spiritual power, 5 faculties, 5 powers, 7 factors of enlightenment, Noble Eightfold Path. Now, some people have the idea that one practices these in sequence. Like first, one starts practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Then when you get some skill in that, then one goes on to the 4 right efforts. Then you go on to the 4 bases for spiritual power until you get to the Noble Eightfold Path. But actually, if you just go down the numerical list, you'll notice something interesting, that the list moves in a numerical order from the groups of fewer constituents, that's 4, up through 5s, then to 7, then to 8. So the sequence is not determined by stages of practice, but rather the sequence, it's purely numerical, so that the lower numbers come first, the higher numbers later. And we'll see that the groups are so interrelated that the Noble Eightfold Path will actually include the group of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts. So there's no sequence, but rather a kind of interwoven fabric of groups. Okay, so we start off with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And we have a general formula. We find the 4 foundations of mindfulness expounded in the Satipatthana Sutta. And there in the Satipatthana Sutta, one finds the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness elaborated by a certain formula that occurs in each case repeatedly in the sutta. So the way this formula goes is that it says, one dwells ardent, clearly comprehending and mindful, having removed longing and dejection in regard to the world. So this formula is quite significant because we see here that even though this is expounding right mindfulness, but there are actually, in the setting up of mindfulness, several factors that are involved. So we have one dwells ardent, atapi is the Pali word. And this word ardent points to the quality of energy. So when one is developing the foundations of mindfulness, one has to bring energy or right effort into that practice. Then one has clear comprehension, sampajano, which means that in the practice, we can say clear comprehension is the elementary form of wisdom. So one is knowing what one is mindful of. One is comprehending it. And then one is mindful. That implies mindfulness. And so here we have energy, wisdom, and mindfulness. And then having removed longing and dejection in regard to the world, this implies a process of mental purification taking place. So nowadays, mindfulness has become very, very popular, so it's taught even to business executives so they'll be more effective at their work, to sports players, basketball players, so they'll be more effective in shooting for the basket, to boxers, so they'll be more mindful when engaged in a boxing match, and even to soldiers, so they'll be more effective in their military campaigns. But the real purpose of the practice is indicated here to remove longing or craving and dejection in regard to the world. Then in the suttas, especially in the Satipatthana Sutta, the discourse on the foundations of mindfulness, we find, first, the practice of mindfulness explained as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So here we have the 4 foundations are given as Kai Anupassana Satipatthana, that is the contemplation of the body. Vedananupassana, the contemplation of feeling. Chittanupassana, the contemplation of mind. And Dhammanupassana, which has a very broad range. I just translate it as here it's given contemplation of mental objects, which I think is not quite accurate. I would say simply contemplation of phenomena. But it's phenomena which are organized into groups that accord with the nature of the Dhamma, of the teaching. And then in the Satipatthana Sutta, these 4 foundations of mindfulness are explained in detail. And so for contemplation of the body, we have 14 separate contemplations. So these are the practice of mindfulness of breathing, which is usually taken as sort of the starting point or foundation of everything to follow. Mindfulness of bodily postures, which becomes prominent when done in a systematic way with the walking meditation. So when one is walking, one becomes aware of each phase of each step that one is taking. Then we have mindfulness and clear comprehension, which means applying clear comprehension to all of the little activities of one's day-to-day life. Then we have the meditation on the 32 parts of the body. This is in order to develop disenchantment with the body. So analyzing or investigating the body in terms of its 31 or 32 constituent organs, tissues, fluids. Then the meditation on the 4 elements of the body. So investigating the body in terms of the earth, liquid, fire, and air elements. And then we have what are called the cemetery contemplations, the contemplation of a corpse in 9 different stages of disintegration, from immediately after death all the ways to the point where nothing is left except dust, the dust of the body. So in this way we get 14 contemplations of the body. Then the contemplation of feeling means observing the feelings as being either pleasant, painful, or neutral feelings. Then contemplation of mind is observing one's state of mind and knowing the state of mind. And in the sutta, 16 contrasting states of mind are explained. The most important is when the mind is governed by greed, aversion, or delusion, to know this is a mind with greed, with aversion, with delusion. And when the mind is without greed, without aversion, without delusion, to know the mind is without greed, aversion, delusion. Okay, then now you'll see the meaning, the contemplation of dhammas, the contemplation of phenomena. So this practice involves the observation of phenomena organized in particular groups that accord with the nature and aim of the Buddha's teaching, leading to the realization of the Dhamma. So we start with contemplation of the 5 hindrances. When the mental hindrances are present, one knows this hindrance is present. Desire, ill will, dullness, restlessness, doubt. And when the mind is free from the hindrances, one knows the mind is free from the hindrances. Then one moves into the contemplation of the 5 aggregates, which we'll come to later. The 12 sense bases will also come to later. The 7 factors of enlightenment. Now, as one is contemplating the 5 aggregates and the 12 sense bases, now insight is starting to arise. And so now the 7 factors of enlightenment become prominent. And then when the 7 factors of enlightenment reach maturity, then there comes the direct knowledge of the 4 Noble Truths. And so all of these are included under contemplation of Dhammas. So you could see that these are different phenomena: 5 hindrances, 5 aggregates, 12 sense bases, 7 enlightenment factors, 4 Noble Truths. But they're not phenomena just laid out at random, but they're the first. We have to face the barriers, which are the 5 hindrances. Then after clearing the barriers, we go into the contemplation with insight. Insight gains momentum. The 7 enlightenment factors emerge. When the 7 enlightenment factors all reach their peak, then there comes the breakthrough to the 4 Noble Truths. That's the realization of the Dhamma. Okay, we're coming to the 4, what's here translated the 4 supreme efforts, or 4 right efforts. I want to get the actual formula. Okay, here I have it. Okay, now we come, here it's translated the 4 right strivings, which I think it's more accurate than supreme efforts. So we have 4 supreme efforts. These are considered, you could say, modes or expressions of energy. The factor of energy or vigor. And so we have 4 right efforts. The effort to discard evil states of mind, or I'd call it, evil is too strong a word, I call them bad states of mind that have arisen. The effort to prevent the arising of unarisen evil or bad states of mind, unwholesome states. The effort to develop unarisen wholesome states, and the effort to augment, that is, to develop, to cultivate, to bring to maturity the wholesome states of mind that have arisen. So this is the way it's laid out in the Abhidhamma, but I want to look at the sutta formula. Okay, we don't need this anymore. Because it shows that there's actually, even in the formula for the 4 right efforts, an interplay of several factors that are involved. So here we have the monk generates desire for the non-arising of unarisen bad wholesome states. He makes an effort, arouses energy, applies his mind, and strives. Now you see I've highlighted certain words. Do these words ring any bell? Have you come across these words any time within the last hour or so as part of a group? Yeah. You see those factors that enter into the four predominants, we also find in the definition of right striving. And here we have also, there's a mention of unwholesome states and wholesome states. And how is one going to know whether the mind state is unwholesome or wholesome? What does one have to do to make that distinction? What do you have to do? No. Of course, mindfulness is there, but I'm looking for another word. I thought I heard it. Did you pick it up from somebody else? Because I thought I heard it on that side. But you didn't say investigating. So it has to investigate the state of mind. So you see all of those four factors that become predominance are actually already involved in right effort. But in the four right strivings, the one that's given the sort of emphasis, considered, you say, the predominant in the right strivings is effort or energy. And the others are also present, but they're not predominant. Oh. Yeah, we've reached 4:15, so now we're going to stop the discussion now. If you have questions, then we could bring them up for the evenings, during the evening session. So now we'll stop the lecture, and then we'll go for the meditation period.